And we're back in my car. Yeah, so I'm in here in my garage in my car recording again. It's been a while since I committed myself to recording something, not that long, about a month or so. And a lot of these videos stem from just things I've been thinking about and typically writing down or typing into a computer. And there's a pretty big varying degree of things that I'm writing about or thinking about or expressing. One of the things I do is I write a lot of pretty, you know, just blo- garbage kind of poems. And I post a lot of them on Instagram as Dave Writes, if you're interested. And the reason I do that is it's just kind of quite soothing to just express yourself, be prompted by the word you've said before and just try to adhere to some kind of rhythm and rhyme and see where it takes you. I don't really go into it with too much of an agenda. I usually have one or two words in mind, and then before I know it, I've written a 50 word poem that I had no idea I was that I could do that 5 minutes before, and I write them very quickly and just throw them up. And yeah, so it's kind of it's just an outlet, a creative outlet. So yeah, just some little bit of information as well. If you're wondering what's behind me, it's just a red towel. It's on the back window to my car. Yeah, as always, I'm just in the back seat with a lamp and some recording equipment. And it's winter right now in Australia, so it's cold, which is not too bad because I'm not sweating in here as I normally would be because it's quite a closed environment with all the windows up, but it's really good acoustically. Any bloody way. The reason I do these things is just to practice language, really, and talking. And language is a really good way to structure your thoughts and express yourself and find meaning and, you know, communicate with other people. And it's a very good skill to have. So hence why I'm practicing as much as I can, really. As I said with the poems, I write a lot of those, but I also do a little bit more long form stuff, and that's kind of the focus of these videos, particularly blog posts on my website. I'll refrain from plugging that because it gets a bit lame after a while if people keep telling you what to do when you're just trying to enjoy the video. Anyway, so this blog post, and speaking of creativity and writing, is called Violet. And the reason it's called Violet is because if you think about a rainbow, it's the last color kind of from left to right. Maybe ultraviolet would be a better name for it. And the reason it might be is because it's something that you can't see and you kind of forget, or it's the last thing on your list of things to do to express yourself creatively. That's what I'm getting at. And I would say, yeah, a lot of people neglect that side of themselves, and I think we've all got it in our own way. Maybe for you, it's just making something small with your hands, or building a model, or painting, or sculpting, or drawing just on pen and paper kind of thing. Maybe it's doing tattoos, and just not knowing what you're getting into, but just letting the creative juices, for lack of a better phrase, flow. Hopefully not into a drain, but into something productive. Anyway, so the title's called Violet, and the way I'm looking at it, and the way I sort of preface the blog is that is the topic of identity, and I won't go into it too much, but I try to avoid the typical problems with identity at the moment in the mainstream media and pretty much everywhere else, and all the commentary that goes along with it. And I think people are pretty sick of that. It's quite confusing, and it's very Chinese whispers kind of esque, that it's not really beneficial to anybody. It's just there to confuse them. And when they get to the voting polls, people just, if they don't know who they are, or they question some very basic fundamental aspects of their being, they can't really make a decision about the greater world. So it just divides and kind of conquers, if you know what I mean. Anyway, so yeah, I avoid talking about that in the post, and what I sort of get into is that, is your identity a product of, your choosing? I don't know is the simple answer. But what I reflect on is that it's a byproduct of those around you as well. So there's no easy answer to the question of who are you and what is your identity. It can be many things. It could be your personality. It could be the way you act. It could be, the things you blurt out and say. That's just, you don't really think about too much. It's just part of you, kind of thing. But I would argue, and I kind of talk about this quite early on, is that you hear phrases like, that's just who I am. And it's typically prefaced by something negative, what can be seen as negative, kind of saying, perhaps, I just tell it like it is, and then follow it with, that's just who I am. So it kind of means that no matter what I say, it's just honesty and it's right, and don't question it, because if you question it, you're questioning my identity and you're attacking me. And I think it's a good example to focus on because it's something that people believe about themselves and they think it excuses their behavior, particularly with people that are quite either experienced, wise, or knowledgeable. They kind of, just with their presence, put themselves at the top of the hierarchy to say that, they've experienced or know or understand so much that if you disagree, they just pretty much shit on you, kind of thing. And yeah, I don't want to really go into that too much, but what I was getting at was that saying something like, I just tell it like it is, that's the way I am, is really, it shouldn't just be excused, because that part of yourself, you've probably picked it up somewhere along the lines. It's not something necessarily you were born with, even though you might think it is. And, it kind of just puts people in a position where they have to absorb anything negative that you say because it's coming from a place of truth. Whereas you might have ascertained, that truth by, incorrect means, by asking the wrong questions, by assuming the wrong things. And you can't just expect people to accept that. So with the other person listening, they're the observer. And I talk about that, you need to give them credit as well, because at the end of the day, the world is made up of billions of people, and there's so much interaction going on that's shaping you, as in you're not making the choice about what's shaping you. So your identity, may come from within, but also you must accept that it comes from the outside as well. Because without something to bounce yourself off of, e.g. other people, you don't really know who you are, because you just can't, you've got no way of expressing it and seeing how it interacts with the world at large. So yeah, I find that quite important. It's something that I think about a lot, and as I kind of hinted at with people that are quite knowledgeable and whatnot, and it's hard to question the way they go about things. But it's important to recognize that you need to treat the other person with dignity and respect and have an open dialogue with them. And just because, well, quite honestly, you think that it's an intrinsic part of who you are, it doesn't necessarily mean it is. And people can question it. For me personally, I'm pretty, the way I engage in dialogue is I normally, hence why I record these videos, is that I don't really get to talk about what I want to talk about all that much. And it's quite a weird position to be in, because you still have all the internal dialogue that goes with that. You still have all those thoughts and all those questions that don't have answers. And when you're talking to somebody, what I try to do is just not push my agenda all the time. Sometimes I do it because it's just like, I have to see how it measures up. Is it a valid perspective? And you don't really get that unless you kind of commit to saying something. But at the same time, I'm trying to support people in varying degrees, and that comes along with the sort of the position of trying to provide a mental health service. Um, and yeah, I just try to be careful about how I, you know, interact with people, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about me; it's about them, and that I want to learn from them and learn what resonates with them, and then try to frame it in a way back to them that resonates, that they can adopt, that isn't from a place of arrogance or conviction. It's just an open dialogue, and I'm really trying to not push my agenda, as I said, because it kind of it gets to a point, I think, when you open your mouth, and this is a good example. I don't know what I'm going to say next, kind of thing. And then the other thing is, you don't know how the other person's going to react as well. So you don't need to be calculated and careful all the time, but I think that, respecting the other person, that they're whatever they're giving to you, whatever they're saying, is impacting your identity, and it inevitably will be something that you absorb and think about. And you pay respect to them, they pay respect to you. You try not to make excuses for your behavior, especially when it impacts other people negatively. It might be all well and good for you to get everything off your chest and say exactly what you're thinking, and be honest, and chase the truth. But all the people you're trampling over, maybe they were seeking the truth as well, but it just wasn't necessarily as powerful as what you were saying. They didn't say it with as much conviction. And then it gets dismissed, and then that gets absorbed into that person in a way that they don't want to do it again. And then, you might look at people around you and say, oh, he's just quiet, or he's an introvert. And those kinds of things, I don't think they really push humanity along any further, because it just, you're essentially just saying that something's going on inside their head, and you just don't want to know about it, really, at the end of the day. And I think we all need to level each other out, whether you're a confident, extroverted person, or whether you're a withdrawn, calculated kind of person. We're all the byproduct of each other. So I guess my final advice would just be to we all have an identity at the end of the day. Some of that comes from within, some of that comes from seeing how it's received by other people, and a lot of it just comes purely by circumstance and the springboard that is life throwing it back at you. And I think it's just easy to forget that. And it's something that I like to remind myself of as much as possible, especially when I've engaged in a long, arduous, pointless dialogue with myself, is to just, respect other people, and give them some dignity, and maybe put the brakes on your identity just a little bit.